All right, guys, we are live. I'm so excited. I have Mr. Bryan Stevens here today, a therapist. He is the leader and CEO of Promised Land Psychological Services. And so I'm
The
excited to
people of
talk to him
promise.
today. You said what? Did I say it
Mhm.
wrong?
Oh yes, the people of promise psychological services.
The People of Promise. I do apologize. The People of Promise. Sorry, I'm trying to give them a whole new name. The People of Promise Psychological Services. And what we're talking about today is how to recognize some signs within yourself for your own mental health, and then recognizing those signs in your partner. We know that it's a different dating world over the last couple of years with digital dating, with meeting people online, people being catfish. So really understanding your own mental health and then recognizing some traits and habits in your partner is really, really important when we're talking healthy dating and healthy habits. So, Mr. Stevens, can you tell us a little bit about talk to us a little bit about our own personal individual mental health? What do you feel like are some important aspects of just understanding, owning, and really recognizing things in your own mental health?
Well, I think what happens with a lot of people, and first I want to thank you for allowing me to be here. I feel very honored to be here. Thank you so much. But I think with a lot of people, what happens is when they have mental health issues themselves, we have a habit of trying to hide them or not deal with them. And what happens when you get into a relationship, you bring those issues that have not been dealt with into the relationship. And then a
Hmm.
lot of times you get into a relationship and the other party has issues that they haven't dealt with. I know a lot of times in the black community, there's a stigmatism about mental health. You know, if you
Yes.
see a psychiatrist or a therapist, then there's something wrong with you and there's a problem. But this is the way that I compare it. If a person has high blood pressure and they're getting treated for it and they're taking medication, no one blames them. But if someone is dealing with their mental health, then you get all of these stigmatisms and stereotypes, which is not right. So I will tell anybody, before you embark on any relationship, make sure that you have dealt with yourself first.
Nice. So one thing you said is they try to hide their aspects. Now, do you think it's a case where they're hiding it from even themselves or their partner? Talk to us a little bit more about what are some of the signs that you may be hiding your mental health, or how are people hiding their mental health issues?
Well, I think what happens is every morning, everyone puts on a mask. We all put on a mask, meaning what we want people to see. So
Mm-hmm.
even if I'm depressed or anxious, I want to put on a certain smile, a certain mask, so you don't see that. So I can put my best foot forward. Sometimes people even try to hide it from themselves. They'll put on a mask, an inner mask, to try to hide what's going on with them. Uh, but sooner or later, those issues will become too much for you to handle if you do not deal with them. Anytime a person is looking to get into a relationship, you always show your best side, and you don't want people to see your fallacies. Someone once told me that anybody can be Prince or Prince Charming for a couple of days, but sooner or later, your issues will come out. You know what I mean? And I say you have to deal with them, right? And I've been harping on that with a lot of people. Go ahead and deal with what you need to deal with. A lot of things have happened to people when they were younger, or even as adults, that we kind of push down, right?
Yeah.
And we suppress. But dealing with them uh, really helps.
So you brought up an important part about how we press things down, we suppress them. There's kind of been this meme going around that said, maturity was me realizing when people said something that made me angry, not saying anything. And then somebody wrote under it, no, maturity is realizing how to actually communicate and talk about what's wrong with you, and that pushing them down is just building resentment because you're internalizing how you feel and not talking about it. So I know part of what I like to do is help people how to communicate within this space. And what it sounds like you're saying is how to communicate within yourself. If you're having issues and problems, pushing them down and kind of sweeping them under the rug and not seeking help or support, at this day and age, we have tons of support that from coaches to therapists to psychologists to psychiatrists and doctors. There are so many ways to kind of reach out and get support. And it sounds like what you're saying is before you enter into kind of a relationship, Like I love that phase of Erickson where he talks about intimacy versus isolation, because it talks about before you can connect with another person, you got to figure out who you are first. And having some issues, or just understanding what your flaws are, what your mental health needs, these are important factors to contributing when you're dating.
Correct. And I like that with Erickson also. But what I see from a lot of people is a lot of self medication.
Mm,
And sometimes people even will use relationships to self medicate. If I'm in a relationship, that can distract my mind from my issues. I can use that person to be my quote unquote therapist. I can bounce my problems off of them. A lot of people turn to drugs, alcohol, sex. These things are not effective coping skills when it
right.
comes to dealing with things. And they always come out in relationships. They're going to come out. And then you find out, well, my relationship is toxic. But a lot
Mm,
of times we like to look at the other person and say, well, this is why the relationship is toxic. One of the things I do with my client, and a lot of people have a hard time with this, is I tell people to be self reflective,
mm,
right? It is very easy to pinpoint what's going on with someone else.
very
But
true.
when you start to look at yourself and turn the mirror to yourself, then you can improve, right?
True.
When you talk to people about their past relationships, I can almost guarantee you the first thing they say is, well, that other person was this, that other person did that,
Yep.
and this. The first thing I say is, what did you do? Right? That is the first thing. What did you do?
Right.
What can you improve upon? Because if you get into a relationship and you have these baggages, and we all do, then it
Right.
is fair to tell the other person what the baggage is. But some things are only going to come out as the relationship progresses, right? For example, Valentine's Day is coming up, right?
Yep.
There are a lot of people, they have extreme depression during that time because
Yeah.
they want to be in a relationship. But then there are some people who have extreme depression because they're in the wrong relationship, right? And that one
Ooh.
particular day, right, really bothers them, right? We have to deal with these things.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about the wrong relationship. What are some signs or kind of some traits or habits people should be kind of looking out for? Because I have found that I often, when I do dating coaching, my thing is the first 30 days are very important. It tells you a lot about the person, it tells you a lot about the relationship and where it's going, even how you feel about the relationship. That first 30 days tells you a lot of information. We just don't pay attention to it. So tell us a little bit more about when you're talking about other people, what are some signs or things that people should be looking for when they're entering into these relationships to make sure that the person they're entering into, their mental health is okay.
Well, one of the first things I say is to watch the person's words, listen to their words. If
Hmm.
their words don't line up each time and you find discrepancies, that's a red flag.
Mm,
When you find that they're lying about anything, then that's a red flag.
mm,
Also, if every time you're around that person, when you leave them, you feel worse about yourself,
mm.
you need to pay attention to that. You need to figure out, why am I feeling bad about myself when I'm around a person that I am looking to be in a relationship with. One important thing that's like walking in the door with your eyes wide shut. A lot of times the person will tell you what's going on with them,
They
but we're
sure
so in
will.
love, right?
Yes,
So
you're
enamored
right.
that we look past that. They may tell you, well, I am jealous, or I do have some anger issues, but in your mind you're like, but they look so good. You know what I mean? They're so
Right.
nice,
Everybody
right? I
gets
can
angry
deal with that,
sometimes, right?
right? I can deal with that, right?
Mhm.
Well, they've told you, they've been honest. They're telling you from the jump. A lot of times they will tell you
Absolutely.
that in the beginning, like you
Right.
said, the first 30 days. Another thing is to look at the spirituality concept of things. Where are you
Mhm.
guys spiritually? Do you
Yeah.
believe the same things? Right? You may go in with one expectation and they have another, right?
Right.
Those things you really have to address, right? You have to look at it because when you enter a relationship with a person, you've made a commitment, right?
Right.
Well, how do you know that person is a committed person? How do you know that they aren't fabricating their commitment, right? So I say there's a list of things you could look at to see if your relationship is toxic or
Mm.
if it will be toxic. Ask them about their family, meet their family, ask them about their past relationships. And this may sound very elementary, but find out if that divorce is final or not.
Would you did that in elementary? That's the truth. Do you? Because people, I didn't know. They say they were separated. That is like a huge thing, especially as you get older. That people are not getting divorced. That they're saying they're divorced, but they're not, or they're in the process. But in the process could look like a different state. So it sounds like it should be elementary, but it really is something. I say 20 to 30% of the people are entering into these relationships with that concept. Like he says, they say they separated, and you look up and their wife is having excuse me, Shirley, let me talk to you kind of conversation. So I think that is very important. You got to find out that that person is free
Mhm.
for you giving them
Yes.
everything. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm. It happens. Also, and if a person is on medication, I think
Mm,
it is important that you know what medication they're taking and you know what the medication is for. And I don't prescribe to the notion that you go into their medicine cabinet in the bathroom and you do that way. Ask
mhm.
them, right? And if they tell you, don't just say, okay, those names sound good. No, go and research it. What kind of medication are there, what are they taking, and find out why, right?
Mm,
You need to know these things because a lot of times, we wait until the last minute to do the research and we've
right.
gotten caught up, you know. And I believe just like the Bible says, we aren't ignorant of the devil's devices,
Mm,
right? God, he shows us what's
right.
what. It's just up to us to pay attention to it,
Right.
right? And I always say that the eyes are the light of the body,
Mm,
right? If a person is high, you can look in their eyes and tell. If they're
that's true.
sad, you can look in their eyes and tell. Well, if a person is dealing with some mental issues, sometimes you can't look in their eyes and tell, but sometimes you can,
Right.
right?
Right.
If I
That is
give you that
that is
look,
very important. Sometimes you can't. You know what? So that's an interesting concept that you say that you should know. Because I even think mental health or medical. If I had a friend and we're all close now, we all knew how to use her EpiPen. Her words was she was allergic to life, right? She had an EpiPen, and every one of us that stepped foot in her house knew that because I mean, down to fresh fruit before she couldn't eat certain things. So if she was around us and she went and ate someplace, they didn't, it's restaurants sometimes don't adhere to everything you ask for. They think things will be fine. We don't know, right? We were all trained that you stab her in the thigh and we knew what to do. So this wasn't something she waited 6 months to tell us. This was all right, guys. We're going as soon as we go out to eat, we knew. Okay, hey guys, two of y'all are here. Y'all already know. If something happens, the EpiPen is in my purse. So I think mental health is almost just as important that we get into these relationships and some of this medication. I remember with my kids when I was monitoring their charts, this medication is heavy. I've had a couple of kids have really, really adverse, bad reactions having to be at the emergency room. So if you're dating somebody and they're on these medications, anything can happen if you don't know they're on them. Also, you need to know what they're for. Like you're saying, if this person is bipolar, a lot of times what I have noticed is bipolar people can feel their episodes, right? So if
mhm,
you and they have patterns. So if you know that they're bipolar, they're taking medication for bipolar, you know that there's going to be a pattern where they're going to have these episodes and you need to be prepared, right? Or if they're on this medication and they could have a reaction, you need to know what to do. They're 911. If they how soon? So my question in that is, how soon do you think people should be revealing these things? I mean, because it is vulnerable to say, hey, I have a disorder, I have medication, but I need to tell you. How soon do you think people should be having this conversation when they're dating?
that's an excellent question. Because I do believe in privacy and confidentiality. I
Right.
think if you are considering a person that you want to be in a fiduciary relationship with, after a while, you go ahead and tell them. Now, I may not tell them the first couple of dates because we're just getting to know one another. But if we
Yeah.
get to the point where, okay, we're going to be seeing each other consistently, we're going to be serious, you need to know if I have
Yeah.
auditory or visual hallucinations. So
True.
if it happens, right, you know what to do.
Right.
You need to know if I have panic attacks. so you
Yeah.
know what to do, what to look for, right? So I think, I can't put a time frame on it, but I do believe that, once you get to know a person, and you have to take time to get to know them, these
Right.
things should come out. But what happens a lot of times, people do hide them,
Yep. They
right?
don't say.
And you
They
find
don't
out
say
later,
nothing.
it's kind of like, I can go to a restaurant, and this may sound funny, but if my waitress is dealing with anxiety, me being in the profession that I'm in, I can already tell. Just listen
Yeah.
to her talk, or him talk, because they can't stop talking. Oh, certain mannerisms, and I can
It's true.
tell.
You can't turn it off. My supervisor used to say that when I was an intern at Morehouse. Dr. Wright would say, people ask, "Oh, you're sizing me up right now." He said, and I say no, but I am. He said, because you can't turn it off, and I feel like sometimes you can't. You cannot. Like you said, you're at a restaurant and you're like, I can tell this person gets anxious. Like you cannot sometimes just turn it off. You can tell.
Yeah, I was passing the bus stop one day. I saw a lady. She would get up out of her seat. She would go to a certain point, turn back around, sit back down. She kept doing this, and people were looking at her. But in my mind, I said, "Oh, she has OCD." Right?
Mm,
Because I've seen it before. But if
yes.
you're in a relationship, well, you may not be a therapist,
Right.
right? You may
Right.
not see certain things, right?
Mm-mm.
There are certain people in law enforcement, before they embark into a relationship, they research the person's background,
Sure do. People don't talk about
right?
that. They sure do. And they sure do. One of my friends she still does, runs DNA for like courts, and she said she wouldn't even let Mr. Rogers come to her house after her job. Like and I'm pretty, jobs like that they run. You know what I mean? You running research on everybody after you deal with people, all kind of people. They.
Mhm.
I mean, you know what I mean? When you start to encounter that, you start to run research on whoever you deal with. You want to make sure they're not no murderer.
Yeah, yes, yes. And I say, there's a thin line between confidentiality and
Mhm.
deceit. Meaning, yes,
True.
you deserve to have, your
Privacy.
privacy.
Hmm.
But if you're entering in a relationship, then certain amount of privacy you have to default on. There are people who get married, and they may not find out things about their partner until after they're married,
Or they're
right?
dead. Do you hear me? It is people uncovering secrets about their partners at their funeral. So you're right. It is. I think that's important to say. There's a thin line between confidentiality and deceit. I think that is a really insightful, like that's a really important statement because we often hide things under it's private, right? But
Right.
also, how far do you go before it is you're just not telling the truth? Like in the chat, KE says check family history. I mean, because sometimes you hide that stuff away. If you start digging in their family, that stuff will come out.
Yeah.
They're behind it. And they're, matter of fact, I was reading I don't know if this story is true or not, but the woman said every time she got ready to go out of town with her husband, the mother would put something in her food to make her sick. It was on Reddit. And she said, finally, she told her husband, like, your mother is making me sick. And he called his mother and went off. And so finally, whatever happened, the mom ended up putting the guy in jail. I think somehow he ended up, she said she was tired of it. I think he went over there and he tried to attack the mom. So she put him in jail. And finally, the wife
Mm.
asked the mom, well, why did you do this? Like, why would you try to put something in my food? She said, I was afraid that if he got you alone, he was going to murder you. She
Wow.
said because and she said, and I could not live with myself if I allowed that to happen to you. She said because I knew him, I knew how he was going, I knew how his personality was. She said, and I just knew that 3-day weekend you weren't coming back.
Wow.
So
See, that's
people.
that's wow. Yeah. And and it also reminds me, if you're seeing a person, then you should look for certain patterns. Like, say, for example, if the person continues to lose employment and they go
Yes.
back and forth, different jobs, you need to find out why. Now, they can tell you anything, right? But you need to find out why. If they can't stay in one place, if they leave this church, they go to that church, or they leave this relationship, they go to that relationship. They don't talk with their family. You need to find out why. I say get to know their friends, get to know their family, right?
Right.
Because you need to find out some things. I read a story about a guy. I don't know how true this is, but he was dating a young lady, but he never met her family. He never saw about her background. And in the end, he found out that she was a transvestite. Well, she used to be a man,
Wow.
right? And it sent him over the edge. Now, this may seem elementary again, but if I meet her parents, then I can see a birth certificate or a family album, or I
Right.
can
There
see
you
some
go. A
things.
family album from when you were 5 that you don't look like no more. A picture at your kindergarten
Right. You know what I
graduation
mean?
that shows you as a boy, not a girl.
Right.
Yeah.
Because these days it's sometimes it's hard to tell, you know, and
And
everybody
people
has a
get that
right to do
choice.
what
I
they
think that's important to say because I may choose to be okay with that, but I may choose not to be. And I should get that choice personally, right? If that's who you are, you're choosing and you want to live a lifestyle and that's your choice, that's fine. But what if I just, for me, I don't want to choose to do that? Like, in my, if I want to have kids, that's, if I marry a person that isn't naturally born a woman, they can't have kids. So what if I want to have kids and I don't know, there I feel like they should get that choice. You know what I mean? And you're right. If I meet the family and I'm looking through photos, something may be different. And I have more questions. I feel like that goes into what you were saying, confidentiality versus deceit. Because if you're
yeah,
very open about your lifestyle, then you choosing to spend your life with this person, you should trust them with that. If that's what you are,
you're right.
if you feel, you're
Right.
okay with it, then why doesn't that person get to know that?
Right. You have a, and I do agree with people having their choice, but you also should, right, like you said, give the other person the heads up so they can make that choice.
Right.
For example, if someone has dissociative disorder, which a lot of
Yes.
people like to call multiple personality. Well, if I don't tell you that, and
Whew.
one day I have an episode, right, then that's a
Yeah.
problem. You talk to Brian, and the next thing you know, you're talking to Bill, right? And you don't
Right.
know why. Well, I didn't. If I tell you that from day one,
Right.
well, when Bill
And
shows
there's a
up, you
Brian,
need to.
there's a Bill, there's a Steve, there's a Harry, and Harry takes 6-week trips that that don't tell nobody.
Right,
You need to know you're
right.
right.
I, I've met people that got married to people, and they found out the person was bipolar. Well, one
Oh,
way they found out was they checked the bank account that they had together, and the person spent all of the money because they had an episode.
they
You
had an
say, wait a
episode.
minute,
Yep.
right? You're like, wait, they went manic. They spent the money. Or
Yep.
one minute they're speaking to you calmly, the next minute they are fussing at you and they're upset. But this
Yep.
happened in a lot. You don't
Yep.
understand why, right?
Yep.
But
And
then when you
cycles.
find out about it, yeah, So I think when we're in relationships, everybody I think wants to be loved. And
Yes.
there's nothing wrong with wanting to be loved and having romantic relationships. But when those red flags come up, do not ignore them,
No.
right? You need to find out what's going on. For example, I tell any young lady, if you're dating a guy, the first time he puts his hands up to hit you, you leave, right? Because the next time he'll come down, right? He'll come down with
Mhm.
that. Now, most people who are abusive, they may not tell you, oh, well, I like to beat on my partner. No, you'll
Right.
find that out, right? After you've dated them. I knew a girl, she said she married a guy. She married him because he looked like Prince. This is funny, right? He looked like the purple one, rest in peace, Prince.
Yeah.
And but the guy was crazy, and he pushed her down some steps. Right
Oh,
now, you wouldn't think Prince would push you down some steps,
right. Exactly.
right? But the guy didn't tell her that when they got married. He didn't say, "Hey, I'm kind of out of it. I will push you down the
I
steps."
got anger issues and I lose control easily. I cannot manage my
Right,
emotions.
right, 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 right. So
So
those
that's
are
very
things
true. I
to
think that is
look at.
important to really ask these questions to really so talk to us a little bit about red flags and then I know we got like 6 more minutes with you so we gonna ask you your confession but tell us what do you define as red flags. That is like a huge thing on Facebook right now. It's a red flag, it's a red flag if. So tell us, how do you define red flags for people to understand what they should be looking for?
Well, one thing I say is you look for stability. Does the person pay their bills? Um, are they stable? Right? You look at those things first because you want to see if you are in a relationship with them, will it be a liability or an asset? Right?
Yeah.
Because a red flag is, we're dating and I take you out to dinner, but I never can pay. Right?
Oh,
Or you
yeah.
always have to pick me up. Right? That's a red flag. But sometimes we're so enamored that we look over those red flags. Two,
Very true.
I say always listen to the words of the people. I can't reiterate that enough. People will tell you a lot of times what's going on with them because out of the heart, the mouth speaketh, as the Bible says.
Yep.
And so people will tell you a lot of time what's going on with them. But then again, he looks so nice, right? I can handle that, right? I've met a lot of women who they have this nurturing spirit and they feel that they can change a person.
Mm.
I met
Speak
a
to
young
that.
lady
They feel they can
once.
change a person.
Yes, I met a young lady. She married a guy, and the guy told her that he was homosexual, but she
Wow.
thought she could change him. Right?
Oh,
They fell in love, and for a couple of years, everything was fine until he fell back into his lifestyle. Right?
wow.
She couldn't change him. You see what I mean? And so it's the same thing with mental health. Um, if a person tells me certain things, I need to listen, right? If a person is in the car with me and they tell you, well, sometimes I do act a little crazy. Sometimes I will yell and curse. Sometimes I will hit you. You need to listen to that,
Right. And ask more
right?
questions. You know what I mean? Like clarify. What do you mean you get a little crazy? What does that mean? You know what I mean? Because it could be a little crazy is that I get mad and I go home and clean my whole house. Oh, that's fine. You know what I mean? But a little crazy could mean that I throw things, I push you, I break stuff, I destroy property, I go spend all my money. You need to know what a little crazy is. Ask some questions so that you can get some clarity so you know, oh, he a little crazy is actually a lot of crazy, right? A little anger is actually him being
Mhm.
abusive.
Yeah.
So I
I
definitely
heard some preachers say, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you're good. Go ahead.
I've heard some preachers say that when they do marital counseling, sooner or later they have both parties to bring in their financial records, their medical records, um, and let them both look at it. Not necessarily
Mm,
the preacher, the couple,
that's a
right?
good idea.
Because you want to see everything. You can get married and take on that person's debt, sharing to
And
that
be
debt.
unaware.
You can get married and the person has certain medical issues you don't know about. You don't find out
Right.
about it until you're married. Well, you have to deal with that. Same thing with mental health, right? You go into it, the person is dealing with some things, but they're hiding it.
Right.
Some people, in mental health, we call it presentation. Some people present very well.
They
They
do.
present well, but yeah, but until they have an episode, you don't know.
Very true. Very true. This is really good information about dating, your own mental health, how to really examine the mental health of your partner before you get involved. And I really appreciate you just giving us some tips, talking about toxic relationships, healthy habits, how to be healthy for ourselves and get support. So all right, Mr. Stevens, what is your confession?
My confession?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
I
called
didn't know
the
I was getting
confession.
a
You gotta
confession.
confess something. You ain't even watching the episodes.
Yeah, I did. I didn't think I would have to confess something. Let me see. Um, Let me see. Confessions. I will say this. In past relationships, I have been selfish. And I will confess this, where everything was about me. And I wasn't very self reflective, meaning I always blamed the other person, right? I will confess that. And I've destroyed a couple of relationships in the past because of that until I learned to be self reflective, right? It's very easy to blame. I think of the story of Adam and Eve when they got caught up. One thing Adam said, well, it was that woman that you gave me, right? Well, God told him what to do and what not to do, right? He should have accepted responsibility for what he did. So that's my confession right there. It may not be juicy, but it's a
But
confession.
that is because a lot of people don't understand that. I think that self-reflection that you talk about is very important because it is, one thing I was talking to my cousin this weekend. We talked about in marriage. I said, yeah, honestly, I wasn't as good as everybody kept telling me I was a good kid, right? I said, then I get married and realize I'm not as good as everybody keep telling me. I am a flawed individual. I have issues. I'm not always right, even though I'm a know-it-all and I like to be right. My husband is right sometimes. So I think that's important in relationships when you reflect on who you are, what you need. The one thing one of my mentors told me was you got to figure out what you can live with and what you can't, right? So I think that is a good confession to say, in past relationships, I own my part of it because sometimes we don't do that. We do not own our parts in how relationships fall apart. And so even I think outside of dating, friendships and family relationships, a lot of times we are not accountable. We do not own our part. So I think that is very vulnerable and courageous of you to say, you know what, I own my part in it. Some of them I thought all about me. I didn't, I didn't think about the other person, and I have ruined some relationships because of that. So I think that people need to hear that sometimes because we'll ruin relationships and keep ruining them, right? Like you said, when you jumping from job to job, you jumping from person to person. Why? You know what I mean? You need to ask yourself some questions. Is it childhood trauma? Is it stuff you're experiencing as an adult? Do you have some unresolved mental health issues that you're not talking about? So I think that is important for people to understand. When you enter relationships, it is two flawed, imperfect individuals trying to figure it out. I tell people all the time when they look at, oh, your marriage is great. No, we work. My husband will tell you last night, he was trying to talk to me last night and he looked at me and said, I got about 5 more minutes with you because you about to go to sleep. I said, no, I'm not. I am going to take a shower, eat cereal, and work on my business. He looked at me again and said, you got 5 more minutes and you're going to be out sleep. And he was right. He was trying to have, serious conversation. And I was about to nod off. So you got to acknowledge that when you're in these relationships, the things that you have, the person you are, it's not going to be perfect. You both have different backgrounds. Me and my husband grew up completely different. And when we talk about down to the cities, the family structure, his family is very large. My family is not that big. In their family is a lot of boys, and my family is kind of a mixture, and the girls are older. So all of that plays a part in relationships. So thank you for sharing that in past relationships, I understand my part in it. And moving forward, I know what to do to be more engaged because you're right. We all like to be connected. We all want love in some kind of way. And I think understanding each other, which is why I really like to do these conversations, because I realize a lot of times there are so many misunderstandings when you're communicating and talking. This is how we end up talking to the wrong people, having terrible friends, or really ruining a good relationship because we just weren't able to talk it out or work it out. So I definitely appreciate you coming on and talking to us. So tell us where we can find you.
Okay, I was just about to ask, can I give a shameless plug?
Not shameless, you people, because right now, let me tell you guys, he may not be saying this, but I came from an agency and I'm sure his is the same way. So you better get on this because therapists are full. And you're talking about Black therapists, a Black male therapist is like a unicorn. Do you hear me? They are full. Coaches are filling up to help the therapist. They are full because right now we're still in a pandemic, right? Family structures, digital, all these things that we are now kind of working through, digital dating, family structures, how to live in life, to be in a pandemic. We're kind of working through all of these things. So, where can they find you?
Okay, well, the name of my company is the People of Promise Psychological Services, and I've been in business about 2 years, but I've been in the profession for about 12 years. The best way to reach me is to call me 678 964 1868 is the number you can call. I would give you my website, but it is long. It's a very long website. But if you
You're
call
gonna
me,
send
I
it
will
to
give
me.
you
We're
a
gonna post it in the description on YouTube. So if you guys want to find him, this website is gonna give me his information. We're gonna post it in the description. As you see, I got a napper that woke up. We're gonna post it in the description on YouTube, but you can still give it out.
Okay. And I also I used to be a teacher, so I focus a lot on children, but I also counsel adults, specialize in depression, anxiety, all kind of issues, grief, and loss. I do believe in respect and confidentiality, and so I am taking clients. Everything is virtual right now because of the pandemic. As soon as that lifts, I'm again doing in-person sessions.
Nice, nice. And you know, people are looking for telehealth therapists. You know what I mean? Because it is really, I mean, it's a lot people are trying to internalize. We need some support. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing as a therapist, your company and the community. You and he was a teacher. He used to teach me social studies. So I think that's interesting that we
Yeah.
both ended up kind of in the same profession as therapists. And that's what happened. I started teaching and I said, I cannot help these kids one by one, like in a group setting like this. I gotta go. And I'm glad you work with kids because actually a lot of therapists that I used to work with kids, they don't work with kids anymore. All the therapists that I
Yes.
started referring to, they do not work with kids. So that's good to know that you do work with children and adolescents because that's needed. And a lot of people aren't working with them anymore.
Right.
Because
Right.
that family dynamic piece is you got to really be digging in. You can't just work with the kid. You have to work with the family if you want the kid to get better. And that's the piece sometimes it's missing.
Yes. 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 Well,
Well, all
thank you
righty,
for
Miss.
having me.
Well, thank you for coming. We hope that you'll come back. Anytime you want to, just let me know. We enjoyed this conversation. I feel like it is much, much needed, especially with this month being all about love. And you've given us some really good tips for how to date, how to take care of ourselves, and how to really be in tune with each other's mental health. So next week, guys, I have another guest on the 25th. I have got Mr. Pound per Pound himself, which is my husband. He made a smart comment, so I told him he gets to come on my podcast on the 25th. So he and me will be
Mm.
having a conversation. This is going to be very interesting because, to be honest, if you know my husband, you know we are not alike. We are alike, but not alike a lot. So I am all about talking about relationships. He is all like, "Hey, that's their business. They want help. That's you a therapist, not me." So we have
Mm.
enjoyed Mr. Stevens, and I will see you guys next week.
All right. Thank you.